You were standing at a gas station in some town whose name you can't even recall, wearing a hoodie with a torn sleeve, feeding $90 into a tank belonging to a car that hasn't seen a car wash since the last election cycle. Your phone buzzes. It's your wealth manager. $11 million just landed in your account from selling your stake in a logistics company you built out of a garage. 11 million, and here you are in a hoodie that reeks of campfire smoke because 20 minutes earlier you'd been out camping with your kids and never bothered to change. A man in a tailored suit walks past toward his Range Rover. He glances at you the way someone glances at a stain on a hotel carpet. He has no idea. Nobody does. And in that exact moment, something clicks into place that will shape the rest of your life. Being unseen is the only currency that actually matters once you already have plenty of the other kind. You didn't start out thinking this way. You grew up believing wealth was meant to be loud. The big house, the flashy car, the oversized watch. That was the dream everyone tries to sell you, wasn't it? But somewhere between your first million and your first 10, you started noticing something nobody ever warns you about. The instant people learn what you're worth, they stop seeing you as a person. They start seeing a figure instead. You still remember the exact night it hit you. Dinner with old friends from your 20s, the kind who knew you long before any of this happened. You mentioned, almost in passing, that you just closed on a property. You didn't even mention the price, just the fact of it. And you watched the whole table shift, not dramatically, just a subtle recalibration in the air. Someone laughed a little too hard at your next joke. Someone else went quiet. Your oldest friend, a guy who used to split a single pizza with you because neither of you could afford a whole pie, suddenly wanted your opinion on a business plan he'd been sitting on for 3 years. You went home that night and couldn't sleep because you realized the version of you that existed before the money, the one people had actually loved, was gone. In its place stood a symbol. That's when you began disappearing. It starts small. You stop wearing the watch, not because you dislike it, but because you notice how a $40,000 chunk of steel on your wrist changes the temperature of every room you enter. You go back to driving the older car, the one pushing 200,000 miles, because you finally admit the newer one was never really about comfort. It was about being noticed, and noticing is exactly what you no longer want. You want to be underestimated instead. There's a very specific kind of power in being underestimated that no amount of visible money can purchase. You test the theory first at a hardware store. You walk in wearing paint-stained jeans and the clerk treats you exactly like every other customer. No performance, no angle, just plain information and a fair price. You test it again at a car dealership in the same jeans and the salesman barely glances up from his phone. You test it once more at a charity gala dressed in a $40 clearance blazer, and you stand there while 3 different people talk right over you as if you're not even in the room. Holding a glass of lukewarm champagne, you feel something strange rise in your chest. Not embarrassment, relief. Because in that room, nobody is calculating what they might extract from you. Nobody is putting on a performance designed to siphon value out of your bank account. For the first time in months, you're simply a man in an unremarkable blazer, and it's the safest you've felt in ages. This is the first lesson in the world of quiet money. Visibility is a liability, never an asset. The people who taught you this never said a word. They showed you through example. Once you know what to look for, you start spotting them everywhere. The man who owns 4 car dealerships wearing a $15 t-shirt, driving a Honda with a cracked windshield. The woman worth $200 million seated 3 rows behind you in economy on a domestic flight, reading a library book with the due date sticker still stuck to the spine. These people aren't cheap. They're calculating something you're only just beginning to understand. Every dollar spent on visible wealth is a dollar spent advertising your own vulnerability. You start keeping a mental tally, though you'd never dare write it down. The Rolex left in a drawer keeps you from becoming a target in the wrong parking lot at the wrong hour. The modest house keeps your property taxes from tripling and keeps strangers from Googling your address after some local news piece about your business. The old car keeps every mechanic, every salesman, every stranger asking for a favor from silently calculating what you can afford before they've even opened their mouth. Somewhere around your 2nd year of living this way, a project comes along that puts everything you've learned to the test. A family office reaches out, quiet people, old money, the sort that never shows up on any public list because 3 generations have worked hard to keep it that way. They want you to consult on an acquisition, $60 million moving through shell structures so clean, they barely leave a trace. On paper, your job is simple. Verify the numbers, advise on structure. Stay out of sight. They test you before they trust you. You realize this 3 weeks in when a man at a networking event starts asking pointed questions about your net worth, your properties, your recent deals, questions too specific to be casual. You give him nothing. Vague figures, deflected answers, a joke about a rough quarter. He nods, apparently satisfied, and you never see him again. Later, you learn he wasn't some random stranger at all. He'd been sent by the family office to see whether you could keep your mouth shut when it counted. You pass and the door swings open wider. This is the second lesson, and it's the one that costs people the most when they learn it too late. In rooms with real money, the ones talking about their wealth are the ones being watched, not the ones doing the watching. Silence isn't modesty. Silence is armor. The deal moves forward. You're now inside rooms that show up on no social calendar anywhere, in buildings with no signage, meeting men and women who could buy up entire city blocks and instead choose to wear department store clothing because a $500 suit draws exactly the kind of attention a $50,000 deal cannot survive. You watch one of them, a woman who oversees a portfolio you'd need 3 lifetimes to build yourself, order the cheapest item on the menu at a business dinner. Not because she's counting pennies, but because the version of her that orders modestly is a version nobody bothers to remember. And being forgettable is the entire strategy. You start to feel the shift happening inside your own identity, and at first it unsettles you. You catch yourself flinching at the thought of buying something expensive in public. A strange guilt creeps in walking into a nice restaurant, an urge to explain yourself to a waiter who couldn't care less. You realize you've built a second self, a decoy, and somewhere along the way, that decoy started feeling more real than the man hiding underneath it. Your spouse asks you one evening, half joking, whether you're ashamed of everything you've built, and you don't have a quick answer ready because the question lands closer to home than you expected. You're not ashamed. You're careful. There's a real difference. But saying that out loud makes it sound like an excuse anyway. Then the stakes shift entirely. A local news story breaks about the acquisition. Badly sourced, half the figures wrong, but your name appears in it. Not prominently, just a single mention buried in paragraph 9, but it's enough. Within 72 hours, you get 3 calls from people you haven't spoken to in a decade, each one pitching a business idea that just needs a little seed money. A distant cousin messages asking to borrow $20,000 for a wedding you weren't even invited to. Someone knocks on your door claiming to be from your insurance company, asking oddly specific questions about your property. This is the moment invisibility stops being a lifestyle choice and becomes a survival mechanism instead. You realize exactly how thin that veil really is. One article, one careless mention, one loose comment at the wrong dinner table. That's all it takes to turn you from a private citizen into a target. And once you're a target, you don't get to pick which kind. Sometimes it's a friend with an open palm. Sometimes it's a stranger with a scheme. Sometimes it's worse than either. You spend the next month rebuilding the wall. You scrub your name from every corner of the internet that can be scrubbed. You shift certain assets into structures with names that mean absolutely nothing to anyone scanning a public registry. You go back to the $15 t-shirts in the car with 200,000 miles on it. Not because you enjoy the act, but because you finally understand it was never an act to begin with. It was protection. And for one season, you'd let your guard down, and that one season nearly cost you everything. The family office notices. The woman who ordered the cheapest thing on the menu invites you to a private lunch. This time it isn't a test, it's an acknowledgement. Without any theatrics, she tells you that the people who last in this world aren't the smartest or the richest. They're the ones who never forget that every eye on them represents a potential cost. She tells you she's been doing this for 31 years and has never once appeared in a magazine. Never once posted a photo of her home. Never once told a stranger what she actually does for a living. She tells you her net worth in a whisper, as though it were a secret, and it's one of the largest numbers you've ever heard spoken aloud. Only then do you fully understand why she whispered it. You leave that lunch a different person than the one who walked in. The hoodie at the gas station, the 11 million landing in your account. The man in the suit glancing at you like a stain on a carpet. All of it flashes through your mind at once. And for the first time, you understand exactly why he never saw you. You'd made yourself impossible to see. And that's precisely what saved you. Now you live by a set of rules nobody ever taught you in school and no finance book ever printed. Never confirm a number, never dress for the room you're in. Dress for the exit instead. Let the world underestimate you every single time, because anyone who underestimates you is someone who can never use you. Wealth that whispers survives. Wealth that shouts gets hunted. You still remember the exact weight of that $11 million transfer landing while you stood there in gas-stained jeans, and you remember thinking, in that moment, that it was the start of something loud. It wasn't. It was the start of disappearing on purpose. One choice at a time, until the version of you that exists in public becomes a ghost, and the version that exists in private is the only one left that's actually real. So here's the question that matters more than any figure on any account statement. If the safest form of wealth is the kind nobody can see, then how much of the life you're chasing right now is really about freedom? And how much of it is really about being seen? And when the moment comes for you to choose between the two, which one will you actually pick?